So good afternoon. It's 12 o'clock on November 6th, and we are going, I want to go ahead and open the meeting for the Athens City Planning Commission for today. So the first item on the agenda is to determine whether there's a quorum, and we have all five committee members, all five commission members here, and so we do have a quorum. Next is the deposition, basically the approval of the minutes for the last meeting that we had. It's been a while since we met, September 18th, and all commission members should have those in front of them. And so I would entertain a motion and/or comments about them now. Are there any comments, corrections, concerns? Have anything there?
I move approval.
So it was moved for approval.
I'll second.
And seconded by, okay. Well, no further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I abstain. I was not present.
I abstain.
Okay. Okay. So today, and let me make sure that I'm correct on this. The printed agenda identifies 3 communications. Is that all we have today? Okay. Okay. So the first item for communication is an application for Title 41 PUD for 34 Elliott Street. And Mr. DeLuca, I believe that is yours. So, but to start, we'll ask David Riggs if he has anything he would like to.
Sure. Yeah. So we've been working with the developer, the applicant, on this 34 Elliott and Depot Street. 34 Elliott, as you may recall, was they first came up with a zone change request. That zone change request was approved by this board and by City Council. So now their next step is to come back and do a Title 41 for residential, multifamily residential on this property. We don't have, at this point, don't have a site plan yet, but we do have a floor plan that's in your packet. I understand that the parking, the proposed parking is going to be off-site, so there's an adjacent parking lot right adjacent to this, and they would seek off-site parking with a deed restriction.
Is the off-site parking owned by the same person? It is. Mr. DeLuca, do you have anything you'd like to say, or at this point?
No, any questions you might have or whatever, I'll answer what I can. Richard Schultz is the engineer on this project, so there may be things that are on my scope, I guess. But yeah, the parking is the lot right next to it. So it's all combined there like that. It is a second parking.
Well, one question I have is, will we have a site plan before the next meeting when, in theory, we would bring this to a vote? In 2 weeks.
I'll have to contact Richard. He mentioned that he can get something together, so.
Okay. I would say we wouldn't vote on that unless we had that presented to both you, David, and to the commission. Yes, sir.
If I could just make a comment on that, it is kind of difficult for our office and the developer to go back to back on these meetings. So you have a communication, and then we have to post the property for 2 weeks prior to the second meeting, and sometimes that's really, we're cutting it pretty close to be able to do that. So
okay.
We would prefer if we had more than 2 weeks between the communication and the case.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Sir, sometimes the applications for a Title 41 are much more complete at such time that a communication is being made, and we can make that window because we have already had the chance as a city staff to review and take a look. In this particular instance, just a floor plan is not sufficient from an internal review without a site plan. And to David's point about the the fact that our Title 41 legislation requires that posting of 2 weeks, I mean, they'd effectively have to go right back out and turn and post it like this morning, like immediately to say that it's going to come back as a case, and the fact that our group, so I don't think that this could come forward in 2 weeks, without additional plans unless they showed up this afternoon. And also to clarify the record, Richard Soltz is an architect, which is different than an engineer. There's two different licensure paths, and just to make a point, that's both design professionals, both have authority to under state law, but those are two different professions.
Well, I, for one, am not opposed to taking longer to do this. I know as a commission, we have tried to continue to move things along so that development can happen in a timely fashion. But I do think having more time, since we don't have a floor plan, makes a lot of sense to stretch it out a little bit more.
I had a question, and thank you for the packet. And I see that, yes, there is the floor plan. And could you maybe walk us through the floor plan? Is that possible to show it? My question being, the total number of units is going to be 3 stories high, so the total number of units and whether or not there is 12 two-bedrooms, so it is 24. I saw the reference to 24. And will some of those be providing handicapped accessibility, ground floor level ones, that bedrooms are accessible on the first floor, that kind of thing, universal design at all?
As of right now, we're still going through the planning on that.
Okay.
But obviously they're looking at the first floor thing.
Right. Certainly at some of the other developments we've been looking at recently, I know that's come up as a question from the Commission on Disabilities, what kind of access and design features are making it inclusive for our community.
So a question to that, and maybe this is for David and this is for Mr. DeLuca. Where is the finished floor relative to the 100-year floodplain? Because my gut feel is 34 Elliott is significantly below the 100-year floodplain, and flood regulations require it to be elevated, and so the ability to do a zero-grade entry and elevate the property is probably pretty difficult.
Exactly, yeah.
Unless there's a ramp.
Unless there's a ramp, correct?
Yeah.
So you could
Yeah,
design
they
a
may
ramp.
not be able to keep that ramp on this property, though, to be able to get it to meet ADA requirements. And
It's gonna be
they're-
5%,
you're
is it?
correct. There's a significant difference between the base flood elevation, and we require, by our new code, 1 foot above the base flood elevation for this. And we are using the new effective flood insurance study, the effective FIS that just came into effect. It did change elevations a couple tenths here in this particular case. So we're looking at both of those.
So I'd like to ask the question now anyway about the ramp accessibility, because you do see some other features like Memorial Auditorium that has the ramp, that is handicapped accessible. They couldn't have done a straight shot up once. They did a back and forth kind of serpentine kind of plan, or a wrap around the house to maybe a rear entrance, so that something like that is, I would think that would be of great interest for at least several of the units on the ground floor.
Any other questions? Comments?
Just that my colleagues on this panel have asked the question that was burning in my brain. And that was about ADA accessibility and the need to have ground floor units that are universally designed. But you raised some great points in terms of the elevation. How's that? Gonna have to figure it out as to how to make them ADA accessible. We did the same thing with Kershaw Green with those apartments, and it was ground floor because they didn't want to put in an elevator, but they were able to accomplish that.
The one comment I would make is if Mr. DeLuca, you didn't feel like you might be able to communicate well some of those details, that I would recommend that your architect be here as you present that at that point. Anything else? So we'll move on to the second item, which is a Title 41 PUD for the Depot Street, for a piece of Depot Street, or a property on Depot Street. I think it's 52 Depot. David?
Yeah, this is the same developer, same applicant, different property, similar type of development where he's doing multifamily units, multi-story multifamily units. The only thing I'd comment here, there's no floodplain, but there are some steep slopes on this property if you've been out to see it. In addition to that, Depot, this whole area has soils that's not prone to slippage, but is shallow depth to bedrock. So they want to make sure that we can actually, that the developer can actually build it the way he's got planned, because there is some fairly shallow depth to bedrock here.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Can somebody describe what we're looking at with this, like relative to streets and such? I mean,
Yeah,
it's.
yeah.
I mean, I see the site plan, and then I see but I don't know where this is relative to Union Street and Depot Street and.
Depot's on the left-hand side of the page there. It's a narrow lot on Depot that opens up in the back. So this is Depot, and Union is down here.
It doesn't front on Union then?
No, it does not. Am I correct with that?
It does not.
It's the north section of Depot Street.
Right.
Right, I see.
So this is essentially behind Cat's Den and
110 West Union, yes. It's the first property, I think, above that Cat's Corner and apartment.
Smiling Skull.
Which is.
Really?
Yes,
Up that hillside?
yes. And there is a house that'll be torn down, I assume, is the case in that situation.
Very interesting.
So.
Is the home already demoed or
No.
will be? Okay.
Just based on knowledge of this particular terrain, it would be very important that Mr. Schultz determines the existing utilities on that hillside prior to making a design. I believe that several of the properties in this area are served through lateral sewers that cross through here and come down to Union Street. So, insofar as there's an easement existing or not, I don't know across your parcel. But I know that this, in the back of that section of Union Street, it gets pretty complicated on that hillside. So a thorough investigation will be important.
It might be nice, too, to have a site plan that shows a little bit more of the area, maybe down to Union Street, so you have a sense of how it how it fits in there.
So I'm looking at small diagonal boxes on the plan. Are those aren't the parking spaces?
Those are the parking.
They
Those are the
parking.
parking spaces. And so then the unit is then closer, the large rectangle is closer to Union Street, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And I think my same question would be for this one that it is for the other one. So there'll be 6 three-bedroom apartments. And the same question would be any handicapped accessibility provisions?
We haven't drawn it up yet, but that could be a possibility.
Okay, and universal design, kind of, yep. Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? So I support what Mr. Stone had said about utilities and things. I'd like to see fire hydrants and things like that in the area as well, just to have a more complete picture of what's going on there as well, including the bigger site plan.
And I'll share, I had a slight concern. I know that the lot is pretty restrictive in terms of size and meeting the requirements for parking, but I do have concerns about the diagonal parking, and anyone parking like up close towards the building will have to back 100 feet down all the way out onto Depot Street. So I just have a concern about that, and then where the dumpster is located, that would require the dump truck to back all the way into. So that was a concern. I know the site is quite restricted in its shape and size, but I did notice that reviewing the site plan.
It's a good comment, very good comment. The one thing about Depot Street is it is a dead end, but there is I think I don't know, I can't honestly say this from experience, but they have the stairs at the end, so you've got pedestrian traffic that's moving up and down through there, I think, as well. That would be probably more of an issue than a car, but, when you're trying to back on it. Anything more, gentlemen and ladies? Okay, so that's the second item for communication. The third is an application for a zoning change between Blackburn Road and Richland Avenue, the Spire development.
I think got one more question.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
I don't mean to interrupt, but, so when would be, I know that next meeting is 2 weeks, but after that, when would the next one?
We meet on the first and third Wednesdays of the month.
Thank you.
So there could be more than 2 weeks between, but I'm not sure without looking
Thanks
at
for your
it.
time. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
My name's Sean McNichol, I'm with Spire Development, we're the applicant behind the third rezone for the property between Blackburn and Richland. This property address is 0 Pomeroy Road. We are requesting to rezone the property to R3 multifamily in order to develop a workforce multifamily housing development on the property. We feel that the property is well suited for multifamily development. It borders existing multifamily and commercial to the west and residential to the east and north. The south is a highway, but it's well buffered by a large hillside. I circulated some preliminary concept plans earlier this week. I have hard copies with me if those were.
Yes, so we emailed out today, I'm not sure if you were able to look at them before, but you do have printed copies, they're at the back of your packet of their, this is kind of the front page, but they do have more detailed site plan in that packet.
I brought some larger copies with me if I can.
Yes, sir.
So help me out, I'm a little confused, I think. And maybe it's just something in the title of this under the communication where it's between Blackburn Road and Richland Avenue. So I was mistaken in thinking that this was a zoning change for the Spire project that's happening down by the Athens River's Edge Annex or whatever. So no, that's not. This is on Pomeroy Road?
It's where the garden area, I think, is, correct, right now?
Correct, yes.
It's been garden
So
for years,
this is a separate
garden.
project.
just beyond Florimore.
The 142 Albany Avenue project is moving forward, but we're interested in doing an additional project to bring more housing stock to the community. And so this is in addition to, this would be a separate second project.
Okay, it's just the Blackburn Road that's throwing me, that's all.
Yeah,
Trying to
sorry.
figure that one out.
I had put that in the rezoning application. There's a identified goal within the comprehensive plan to rezone large tracts of property between Blackburn and Richland to R3, which this property would meet that goal specifically. So that may be where the confusion is coming in. I had listed that as
Okay.
a reasoning in support of the rezoning.
I have a couple general questions, if I may, sorry.
Sure.
First, number one, these will be rental, this is not, or is this condominiums,
Rental housing,
rental housing, and is this LIHTC?
correct, yes.
And this area qualifies as, within the census tract of it being a LIHTC project?
Yes, it's in the census tract that we feel scores well.
What's that term, light?
Low-income housing
Oh, low-income,
tax
got it,
credits.
got it.
This is like
Okay. Yep.
Kershaw Green
Okay.
and the other project that Spire is working on. My chief concern, I guess, at this point, and we're just having an open conversation about this, is being fully aware of the high rain events that we have on the Pomeroy and the Pomeroy Road corridor, as well as Richland Avenue corridor would be, and there's more details, I'm sure, as you come forward, because you're just talking about a zoning change at this point, but, you know, in looking through this earlier today, and again, fully recognizing what we see coming off of Coventry Lane and Pomeroy Road, into the headwaters of Coates Run, the impacts that are there, and with more paved surface, non-permeable surface in that area, could further exacerbate an already existing problem in that corridor unless there were, retention ponds built into the project or something in the future. But I just have to get that out there because I know this corridor. I live up this corridor, and so I know it all too well. And the challenges that we do have with Coates Run on Richland Avenue and businesses, even a 3-hour downfall within an hour and a half, or a 3-inch downfall within an hour period of time. We've seen some pretty significant impacts in
Flood
this
Richland.
area, flooding,
Yeah, yeah.
people kayaking on Richland Avenue, which is not good.
Yes.
And I would just second that. We've been residents of that area off that road for 20-some years, both of us have, and seen the flooding that happens further on down on Richland Avenue. I don't know if semi-permeable kind of paving is a possibility as a an alternate to help accommodate that. That would be certainly, I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah.
And same kind of question for this design that you saw me ask of Mr. DeLuca about the handicapped accessibility and universal design, how that's being incorporated into the concept would be helpful for us to have when you come later on.
Yeah, I can address both concerns
Okay,
currently,
okay.
actually. So we're accustomed to detaining water, stormwater with our projects, and we actually improve the stormwater runoff conditions for our properties. So I don't believe that it will worsen stormwater or flooding by any means. If anything, it will improve. So we will be accounting for that in our design. We've incorporated underground detention systems in the past, or which will likely be the case. It is depending on where we put the property, but we will be taking that into consideration. And then, yes, we will meet full accessibility requirements. In fact, as part of our funding source, we will be providing double the 504 accessible units as is required by code.
Okay.
So we will be providing those units.
I'm sorry, David and Megan, do you have any comments you'd like to make about this? You've spent more, maybe both of you spent more time than most of us have. Is there any thoughts or comments you have before we continue further discussion?
Yeah, so I talked with Sean a lot before in selecting this, and the Inspire selecting this property. Being new, I wasn't as aware of the stormwater issue, so I apologize for not sharing that with them beforehand. But I did share concerns about providing sidewalks along Pomeroy Road from this development to get residents to the Richland Avenue corridor. And so I did express those concerns about pedestrians along Pomeroy Road. I think in general, I don't have any other comments or concerns about the property. I don't know if David has anything to share.
I was just, I apologize because I don't remember. Is all of this located within the corp boundaries? I thought some of this was outside, and an annexation may be required to take all of this property into the city.
This city is fully,
Okay, all right.
this
thank you.
property rather, excuse me, is the city.
I don't have anything else.
I do have a couple
Yes.
questions. So, and I don't know if it's for you or for David. So, the document in front of us is a purchase contract for 28 acres, plus or minus 28.5 acres. And then is the rezoning request for all 28 acres, or is it only for the 8.5?
Just for the 8.5.
Okay,
We find that the hillside is cost prohibitive,
sure.
so that will remain green space.
So they're basically forcing you to buy the whole thing just to develop the little bitty part that's fronting on, I understand. All right, second thing is, and this is more of a comment, I think as you go forward, we don't have a problem in Athens with apartments, rental property, right? You just saw two other potential Title 41 of someone trying to build more apartments in Athens. We do have a shortage of places that people can buy and build equity. And the LIHTC program probably doesn't allow for that, and that might not be your business model. But, I know when people ask to have zoning changed in an R1 area to something other than R1, that people come out of the woodwork to fight that. And I'm not saying that we're going to vote this down. I mean, obviously, we'll pass it on to city council based on what we review. And then the city council ultimately is the entity that approves zoning changes. But I could foresee opposition that would be easier to overcome if there was a way you could design this project to be an owner-occupied situation or a condominium association or some sort of opportunity for people to build equity rather than more apartments in Athens. But that's just a comment. We can see how the chips fall as you go forward. I don't know if you guys have any more thoughts on owner-occupied, multifamily versus more rentals.
David and I were talking, and remembering that the section of Pomeroy from this property and then further to the west up until it meets with Richland, the north side of that is currently zoned B3. So the R3 and B3 comparison is maybe or not comparison, but their juxtaposition is a little bit more compatible than the R1. So that was really the only comment that we didn't share previously.
Sure. Is this a, so you're not going to develop this whole site, which, on this drawing is a sizable property. Is this then this is not a phase one?
Correct. No.
So that you don't see penetrating further into that property to develop that?
Correct. No, we do not. And the rezoning is only for that one parcel. We would have to rezone entirety to.
I don't know how you
Further.
do that, like without millions and millions of dollars.
I haven't been in
It
there.
is quite steep. It's
Yeah.
an
Okay.
exceedance of 25% slope.
Well, and we're from road still exists up there.
Yeah.
That they've had some slip issues with
Right.
from road, which is now a dead end unto itself. Because it used to come in behind where the gas station is.
So is there any other access to this property?
There are two access points to it. One is in between some single-family homes, which would remain untouched.
Oh, I see that small strip, that blue or black.
Yeah, we would only be accessing the site where shown in the concept site plan.
Yes.
I would second what Service Safety Director Stone has said about the need for other kinds of housing other than apartments. There would be, it'd be really interesting to see something else, like a possibly, owner-occupied townhouses, even fourplex, I don't know. But my other question when I looked at this was how close. I wasn't quite sure I understood how close the actual apartment units would be to the existing houses on Pomeroy Road. Maybe, do you have any pictures that would show how that butts up to the other places?
Yeah, there, you can see.
Then
So,
the concept site plan, we position the building as far west as setbacks would allow, which is the opposite
Just
side
like
of
that.
existing single
See,
family.
this is where the,
Oh, that is, right, where the
Yes.
single families
Yeah.
are. Okay, I see, and you did put the buffer, right. And I know that in another case, I think we worked with another piece of property where maybe some kind of buffer planting. I mean, I know that's far down the road, but,
Yeah.
landscaping, planting, that kind of thing, that, buffer.
Yeah, certainly, we're open to doing that, and this site plan is truly just for illustrative purposes of, just to discuss the concept, far from refined or final.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I would note that they do exceed the new setbacks, side yard setbacks. I think the new setbacks here for the proposed zone is 5 feet, and so they do exceed that the new bulk controls.
Yeah. Which those are officially effective today.
Today.
So that's how new they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I sense that in your work on this thus far, you do the changing to an R3 for this seems to make sense from your perspective.
I think it makes sense, especially since the building is located further on the western side of the property and closer to the other businesses, and there are other apartments back in there too.
So I support the discussion about more of a, maybe, you know, not to say you couldn't have apartments there, but maybe more of a mixed type housing or something like that would make some sense. Because we do have a difficult time finding, for new people coming into the community to find housing. As Mr. Stone said, you know, that they can build equity in.
Yeah, unfortunately, the constraints of the funding source don't allow us to do that. It will be a rental housing type project, but I will add that there are no restrictions on occupancy. It's a general occupancy project. And so we often find times that it is entry-level professionals that are moving to town that are in search of housing. It would not be student housing. And so this product type really helps to just increase housing stock and increase the flow of housing stock within the community. If there is dedicated general occupancy housing that is affordable, we find that seniors will sometimes move in, which can open up single-family homes for sale, and it just provides a location that people are able to find somewhere new and decent to live, to come to the community.
Can you explain what you mean by general occupancy?
Yeah, so for these types of projects, oftentimes there can be senior restricted housing, and this is not senior restricted. There are no age restrictions to live.
Okay. Are there income?
There are
caps?
income limitations, that's right. So it'll serve a variety of incomes. There's a range of 30% up to 80% of the area median income, and the average income will be 60%.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, is this a 4% or 9% LIHTC, do you know?
This would be a 9%.
9%? Those are difficult to come by.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. As I had said before, you know, I don't know when Mr. Riggs and will want to bring this forward for a vote, but the earliest it could be would be 2 weeks, and it may be after that.
And that's just for the rezoning.
That's just for the rezoning, and they would need to go to council afterwards.
Correct. And then there'd be a separate process for Title 41? if we were to do that?
That's correct.
Thank you for your time.
So that concludes our communications. The next are reports. Mr. Riggs, do you have a report today?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any reports for today.
Okay. And Ms. Jennings, do you have a report today?
Well, we alluded to it earlier, but the bulk controls did get passed by council, and so they are effective as of today. So congratulations on those amendments. Also wanted to announce, which it has been out now, I think we put a press release out over a week ago, but we did get $2 million from the state's Department of Development for the through the Welcome Home Ohio program. And so we will be, those funds are to build affordable housing. The city will be like the builder developer of those homes, and they are required to be owner occupied, and they do have income restrictions as well. And they are deed restricted for income limits and the owner occupancy requirement for a minimum of 20 years. With our application, we were required to submit some sites that we had selected, but the funds are not held to those particular sites. So we can use those funds to develop up to 8 affordable housing units within city limits. And the beautiful thing about the funding too is because the city is the developer on it, the profits that we get from the initial sale will go back into kind of like a revolving loan or revolving funding program, so we can use those to build additional affordable housing units as well. So we will be working on that over the next year or so probably, and looking forward to that opportunity. And then the last thing I'll announce is that we are now under contract with American Structure Point to do an overlay zone. We're generalizing it to a corridor overlay zone, but we will be using Stimson kind of as an initial application for that. So the process for public engagement and stuff will be starting next year, but we are meeting with the American Structure Point firm now.
Yes.
Two questions. Well, one, congratulations on the grant and the success on that. Is it possible for you to share the application that was submitted, so we're just at least aware of some of the sites that you're considering? And I know those aren't final, but. No?
We can.
Sure.
Yeah, I sense a reluctance, but,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hey, so.
Go ahead.
Hey, I mean, I'll be
Please.
very, very clear on this one. So the state of Ohio's press release got out ahead of us and publicized that one of the locations that we had identified and we had submitted for was the former West Elementary School site, and specifically the frontage on Central Avenue, prior to us getting to engage with the Athens City School District. So basically, an announcement went out that
Sorry.
said, we're going to build houses on property that's
Okay.
not owned by the city of Athens,
Okay.
it's instead owned by the schools. And so, from a managing of the information going to the public perspective,
sure.
we kind of fell down there in that, and it's nobody's fault other than the state was excited
Being
to tell
eager,
people
yeah.
about this project, and we needed to work that first. So
I am fine with keep us apprised, and when it becomes appropriate for you all, press release wise, and I understand exactly, I've been in that situation before myself, so that news gets out ahead, but it would be nice, so
Absolutely.
that we're, when you think it's appropriate, share the possible location sites with me.
And, well, what about the idea that, are they dispersed over most of the city, or are they located in just, like the West Elementary School site is obviously in the western area?
No,
But are they, when you submitted the application, was it pretty broad in terms of pointing out sites around?
it's for urban infill. I don't know if you want to speak.
So our initial application was for a total of $3.5 million. So we didn't get funding to support all of the sites that we had selected, but we do get those $2 million to build 8 units. And even though we had to submit those sites with our application, we are not held to those sites at all. So we can look at what is going to be easiest and most effective for us to develop within city limits. So it could be spread out, it could be concentrated, it depends on the site that we end up landing on.
It's all good news. $2 million for housing. I mean, that's incredible. That's great.
Yes.
Well, and to include that, this was mentioned, it's basically kind of creating a revolving loan fund, and not a loan, revolving funding, stream. However, it's finite, not just in the amount, but in order to make this work, with the grant money being put into these units, we're not going to see complete recouping of that money coming back as the sale was made. So it's going to be diminishing returns over time, which is fine, because it'll still work in our favor. The other thing in terms of the other sites and not, putting all this out there is that these are largely city-owned sites, but there could be expansion to where it would be potentially acquiring properties that are adjacent to this. So that's the other reason, is just not having full disclosure at this point with
Yeah.
what may transpire in the future.
My second question had to do with the second topic you talked about, the overlay zone for Structure Point.
Yeah.
And if you could, I heard the term, I don't know that I fully understand it. I know overlay zones very basically. So what's this particular overlay zone going to do? And and as a second aside, I was very glad to hear that you're ready for the public engagement portion, because that's what I would think was not evident in the first part of the report.
I think that the overlay zone, the goal of it is to allow for development along corridors, especially in neighborhoods, to foster more pedestrian-oriented development. That's the overall goal. I will be really interested to see the specifics that come out of that language. And I think the public engagement will definitely kind of enhance those that language that we include in the overlay zone. But the point of it is to float above the underlying zoning district. So you can still have a B3 zoned property, but if you were to do like a multifamily building or a mixed-use building, it may have to meet certain criteria in order to meet the overlay zone.
Okay.
So it's probably going to be items like related to how the building interacts with the street, or limiting curb cuts to protect pedestrian safety, even implementing elements like benches, or trying to incite more investment into bus stops along corridors, that kind of thing. Nothing's like nailed down yet. These are all just kind of me being a planner, dreaming about what could be included.
Okay. And their engagement begins when? January 1?
It'll be later in the spring, probably end of February, March. We don't have it scheduled out yet, but not right off the bat.
And is this work going to help further ideas for other overlays in other areas of the community, or?
Our goal is to create this one overlay district that can be applied in multiple areas across the city. We've not identified those other locations yet, but we will be using Stimson as kind of the first place where this overlay zone would be applied.
To this particular endeavor, we don't really have architectural standards in any of our zoning right now, other than the one overlay zone for the Uptown Historic District. And in that particular thing, there's not specific architectural standards per se, but there's, a requirement to have an extra step to go before the Historic Preservation Commission if you're doing improvements or building in that particular overlay zone. We could create an overlay zone that actually, if you meet certain goals, ends up being less restrictive, such that it promotes development in a particular area to achieve certain goals. We could introduce architectural standards that is something that the city would like to have look like on its corridors. The challenge is balancing property owner rights versus aspirations, right? And what a property owner, because I think one of the things we heard probably in one of these meetings was from a property owner on Simpson Avenue, like, I don't want you to take any of my rights away for this property that I have. And so that will be the thing that we balance.
And certainly the architectural, at least some of the concepts of architectural standards would be really interesting. I know at one extreme you've got German Village in Columbus, but at the other end of it, we have some buildings that have come in that look in stark contrast to 20s and 30s styles homes that have been there. Not that everything has to look 20s and 30s style, but if at least it's going to have, going to be there, like the thing going in on Pomeroy Road, there are a fair amount with little porch stoops of homes up Old Pomeroy Road. Is your new development, your apartments, are they going to incorporate that? That would be something that would be interesting, I think. So same thing for Stimson Avenue. Got a pretty kind of eclectic mix there of different kinds of homes, but still some features to them. Some of the, even on Mill Street, some of the homes that I know have been rentals for generations, but they're brick. They have porches, they have pillars, so interesting.
Yes.
Will this overlay include any portion of Carpenter Street? Or will it end at East State Street? So it'll be East State Street to
Right. I think
roundabout?
the Stimson Avenue corridor plan called for the overlay zone to go up Carpenter. So we've not determined yet the boundary for the overlay zone, but it is called for that in the plan.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Megan. So the next item is opportunity for citizens to speak about items not covered on the agenda. I don't know if anybody wants to speak or not. Okay. So the last is announcements and other businesses. Is there any announcements or other business? I will just say that it looks, the new fire station looks wonderful, and it's coming to, I think it's coming to a point where it'll be occupied and used in the not-too-distant future, and congratulations to the city on their work on that. Anything else? Then our next meeting will be November 20th. That's in 2 weeks, at noon here in Chambers, council chambers. And with that, I say that we're adjourned.